Welcome to LabCast, a podcast about the medical laboratory science profession, brought to you by MedLab Convo. To get notified once we drop an episode, you can do well to subscribe to all our social media platforms at MedLab Convo. For questions, feedbacks, and shout-outs, you can do well to send a mail to at medlabconvolabcast@gmail.com. Thank you for listening.
As a medical laboratory professional, some mistakes can take you from the bench to a courtroom. In this episode, we look at the legal side of laboratory practice, from errors and falsified results to confidentiality breaches and real-life scenarios. What happens when something goes wrong? Who takes the fall for it? And where is the line between an honest mistake and professional negligence or misconduct? Welcome to LabCast. The theme of this episode is legal mistakes that can end a lab career. I am Better, and I'm here with my co-host Gideon. Gideon, say hello to our listeners.
Hello everyone, welcome to LabCast.
All right. Today we are here with a seasoned guest who will explore this important conversation with us. Our guest is Patsy Pasom Esq. She's the legal health and compliance manager at Lab Nigeria. We are so happy to have you here. Can you say hello to our listeners?
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for having me here. I'm very glad myself, very privileged to be here with you today. I'm very grateful for the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us today. We'll be starting with the basics. When we hear the term medicolegal, what exactly does it mean, particularly in the context of laboratory practice?
Okay, thank you very much for that question. So I think medical legal in itself is self-explanatory, but then it's kind of where, should I say, let's say where the medical world meets law. Do you understand? So I like to think that there is a legal aspect to every and anything if you are at least in a controlled society, right? So where because in the medical profession or med lab science, there's control in the sense that there's regulation. Do you understand? There has to be some set of rule and regulation, some set of laws that control what is done. Everybody can't just go about doing whatever they want to do without any form of order, if you get what I mean. So where that order comes in is where the legal aspect now comes in, because things have now been made formal, legalized, regulated. So that intersection between medicine and law, right there, is what we call the medical legal aspect of even medical laboratory science. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the response. From what you said, there is a legal side to almost everything we do in healthcare. But let's bring it specifically to the laboratory. At what point does a mistake or error in the lab stop being simply a professional mistake and becomes a legal issue?
Okay, thank you so much. The thing is, not every mistake automatically just becomes a legal issue. There has to be a difference. So where it's kind of a very thin line, right? But a mistake can become, let's say, potentially legal where it involves a breach of a personal or professional duty. As a medical lab scientist or being in that field, I'm sure that you are aware of the fact that you have what is referred to as a professional duty, right? To your own profession, you have a duty. To the people that you would do a service for, you have a duty. So where you breach that duty, right? It can potentially and be like very easily become a legal issue. However, there are what we would, of course, understand to be simple mistakes, because we are human beings and no human being is devoid of error, right? Well, we are still prone to being to making mistakes. We're not perfect. So there is that divide, because you can make a simple error and it's just an error. You didn't breach your professional duty. You didn't cause harm to anybody. It was not intentional. In that case, the error remains just a mere error. But where it begins to cross the line, right, things can quickly turn into a legal problem. I really hope that that was able to, you know, clear the air on the question.
All right. So speaking of errors, we often hear terms like error, negligence, and misconduct used when something goes wrong in the laboratory. From a legal perspective, what's the difference between these three? That's error, negligence, and misconduct. And does the person's intention or the harm caused to the patient change how the situation is treated? Could you give us some examples of some laboratory mistakes that may have or seem minor at first, but can actually have serious consequences for the patient and potentially for the professional involved?
Okay. Now, we mentioned three distinct things, I believe, which is an error, negligence, and misconduct, right? So, as I previously stated, an error is like a very simple mistake, right? And an error is categorically unintentional. You didn't mean to do it. An example would be maybe maybe if you were logging in maybe patients' details, right? And maybe it's a day in the office and you're logging in every patient that comes in, patient 1, 2, 3, and instead of pressing 3, you mistakenly press 4. You didn't intend to do that. It was a simple mistake, right? And simple mistakes can, if not handled early enough or properly enough, can graduate to become something else. Because if you do not cross check, you do not find out that you logged that patient's number wrongly, and it goes on to spin into maybe the person getting a wrong result, for instance. Now that has gone out of bounds and has caused a grievous mistake. But however, the initial issue was just an error. You made a simple mistake and it was unintentional, right? Negligence, on the other hand, has to do with you not. We already talked about like your professional duty, right? So the duty you have, another way to couch it is to call it the level of care that you owe to, let's say, your patients, right? So if you are a professional, you're a medical laboratory, med lab scientist, yeah, it is expected that because you are a professional, you have a reasonable level competency. Let's say you are trained to a specific level. And because of that training, it's expected that you have a level of care that you should give your patients. Now, when you fail to exercise that level of care, it becomes negligence. It means that you knew what you were supposed to do, right? And for some reason, you didn't do it. And you are trained to, that this is what ought to be done. Now that's you're just being negligent in the care that you have given to your patient. A misconduct now has to do with the actual rules and regulations of your profession. As a med lab scientist, I'm sure that you must be aware that there is a body, right? And there is a law that regulates the behavior of med lab scientists in relation to their patients, in the way they do their carry out their day-to-day activities in themselves, in relation to their qualifications, what qualifies you as a med lab scientist, how you remain qualified, in relation to how you are treated by your employers, the duty you owe to your employers. Now, if you breach those ethical rules. It could be professional rules, ethical rules, organizational rules. Where you now breach them, yeah, that now becomes a misconduct, right? Because it could be maybe intentional, it could be part of reckless behavior, or just some level of impropriety, right? That now becomes misconduct. So, you asked for like examples. When it came to an error, right? I already what's the word now? I already gave an example. However, let me state the fact that these three distinct things, an error, negligence, misconduct, three of them, they can easily be interwoven into each other. So you could carry out one activity and you find all three inside. I don't know if you understand what I mean, but they can, it can be one, it can be all three at once, it could be two. So I already gave you an example of an error, where you just mistakenly put in a different number. Now, negligence would mean to breach a duty of care. A duty of care would be something like, as a med lab scientist, if you were meant to, how it may be in the way you handle your patient samples, for instance, you know that you are not supposed to, let's say you're not supposed to talk about what you did in the lab or whose result is who or what a person came to do. That's your duty of care. You're supposed to protect the patient. And then instead, when a patient comes in to maybe collect their result or something, when they leave, you now tell somebody else in the lab there, like, see this woman, oh, she's there, you won't believe what she came here to test. I don't think it's negligent of you. Maybe that person now goes to about it, but the person knows it, and somehow they just gets out of hand. You understand? You've caused a problem. Come to be something as just as you what I'm looking for. You maybe falsifying your results. It could be that maybe you went to school and you didn't pass at where you did. Instead, the part was back writing the exam, you decide to falsify your result so that you will just grant or that you have the qualification that you need. Now that would add professional misconduct, right? So they can marry each other, but they can also be um different. And in your line of work, there are so many things, right? That could be one, what it could be to make an error, be negligent in your behavior, or actually do proper misconduct. So, thank you.
Thank you so much for that profound response. Oh, I'm taking notes. I'm taking notes. So we've seen the role of accountability, and that brings us to documentation, right? How important are laboratory records when incident is investigated? Like worksheets, registers, result books, quality control records, electronic records, and even communication between staff. How much can these records matter later? Is there ever a situation where trying to fix a record now after error can create big the
For the medical profession, it's it's a very sensitive profession, right? It's important that you log everything from registry when you came into the office. If you have like a logbook where everybody records their attendance, you sign in, you sign out, do that. If it's that, you have records for, and I do believe that a well-fitted organization should have records for everything. Who took the sample? Who logged in the results? Who carried out the tests? Who filled in the details of the patient? Everything should be logged. Why? Because when something goes wrong, questions will need answers. This is where we would be asking all those questions I just said, like, oh, who collected the sample? When was it collected? Who logged it? Who received it? Who ran the test? Who logged in the results? Who gave the sent the results to the patients? Everything is going to be asked. That process enables us to be able to find out where something went wrong. Do you get? So sometimes it's not necessarily only about things going wrong in that, or a legal case has arrived. Sometimes it just helps you to better fine-tune a process. If you are running a lab a certain way, by the time you are able to look at data from across multiple weeks, multiple months, you're able to tell, like, okay, this is something we were getting wrong, this is something we could do better. You're able to see, oh, are we overworked? Are we understaffed? But in this instance, since we're talking about, legal issues, when an issue comes up, good records tell a story, right? And I would like to maybe give an example here. I know somebody who was a med lab scientist who was working at a lab, right? She told me this story, and where she was working previously. So as the story went, somebody took a took a sample and was supposed to run a test and didn't run it properly. I'm sorry, as much as I'm in the medical space, I'm still a lawyer. I don't have all the medical I don't know all the medical lingo to use. So please pardon me in that aspect. So anyway, the person took the test, and I'm guessing somewhere along the line realized that what they did was wrong, right? And so it brought out a wrong result. And the person who told me the story, whose story it is, had gone home for the day. Her shift was over, so she had gone home. So you know what the other scientist did, who, well, was her superior. The person now logged in her name as the person who ran the test. So by the time the result came out and they realized it was a wrong result, the client was querying it. They went back to the records and they saw the name of the person that logged the test was this lady, right? So she was going to take the fall for it. It was something that was going to cost her job. But a proper investigation, what really saved her was the fact that she signed out on the logbook where they're meant to sign out before they leave the office. So that record helped show that she had signed out before the test results were entered into the system. So if the test results were entered into the system after she had left, it couldn't have been her that entered into the system. That opened room for questioning, and they now found out that she was not the person who um ran the test. She wasn't the person who made the mistake. And we talked about errors, negligence, misconduct. You can see that in this example I gave, almost all of them came to play. Do you understand? It's here with an error made and somehow graduated into proper misconduct, because you not only logging in a wrong result, you now try to frame somebody else for it. However, the point is that if that record was not taken, that lady would have lost her job on this issue and nobody would have been the wiser. So it's really important to create that chain of events, right? Your records one day may be the only evidence that you have that will save you. It might even be been in situations where the patient changed their testimony or what they were saying. The patient said, do X, right? And the, lab scientist actually did X. And when it didn't go well for the patient denies what they said completely. And they're like, no, we told you to do Y. And the only thing that can save you in that situation is maybe you had a consent form where you told the person, sign and give me your consent that this is exactly what you want to be done. And so when the person changes their mouth and is like, that's not what I said, though. That's not what I told you to do. You just bring out the form, but you signed it. And that usually closes the situation. So imagine if there was no form to sign it. These are little mistakes that are made often. People feel like, oh, it's just record taking. I forgot to do the process. They don't take it that seriously. But when the matter really gets serious, you realize you should have taken it that serious. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Wow. Thank you for the great response. Earlier, you explained that an action can be a mistake, that is an error on the part of the medical laboratory scientist. So that brings us to something very important. From a legal perspective, does the fact that someone did not intend to cause harm protect them from legal consequences? Or can an accidental mistake still result in serious disciplinary or legal action?
Okay, thank you very much. This will be. I can't give a blanket answer for this because every situation has to be examined individually, right? You could have not intended to make an error or be negligent, but you still were. Do you understand what I'm saying? Let's take an example of maybe you were in the office, it had been a long day, you were really tired, and because you were really tired, you logged in a wrong result, or you sent one patient A's results to patient B, right? And it was because you were working with a lot of fatigue. You did not intend to cause a problem, but you still caused the problem. Do you get? And it's going to be handled in the light of that. So the fact that you did not intend to do something doesn't automatically take away the problem. I think this even goes beyond medical science, just generally in life. Your intentions, good as they may have been, or you know, lacking what's the word now? Just lacking negativity as they might have been, does not fully absorb you from the consequences for your actions, depending on how severe those actions are. And so certain things, a lot of things would be questioned, right? Could you have done it differently? Like, for instance, the example I gave where maybe you were really tired, is it possible that you could have called, you could have identified the fact that you were tired and called somebody else to help you? Do you understand? So to what extent did you go to help the problem? If you didn't, well, that's it. That's another problem on its own. Depending on the situation, what it might help you do. In some situations, it might actually get you off, um, you know, without any penalty. But in some situations, all it might be able to do is reduce the penalty that you should face. So it will be handled on a case by case issue. But that is something that is important and will be looked at. You get, was there an intention? Was there actually an intention to cause harm? It comes into play a lot. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ma. So we talked about something in the last question you answered, and that was confidentiality. And we know that this is a very serious and is a very serious legal and professional consequence if it is not done correctly and followed duly. So laboratory professionals handle very sensitive patient information every day. Could you talk to us about why confidentiality is so important in the laboratory? What kind of situations could amount to a breach in communication, and what the possible consequences are when those boundaries are crossed? Let me take the question again.
Okay.
All right. So you made mention of something in the last question that you answered. You made mention of confidentiality, which happens to be a very serious legal and professional um, consequence if it is not done correctly and if it is breached. And so laboratory professionals handle very sensitive patient information every day. Could you talk to us about why confidentiality is so important in the laboratory? What kind of situations could amount to a breach, and what the possible consequences are when the boundaries are crossed?
Okay. Thank you very much for the question. So confidentiality is a very strict duty of care that healthcare providers generally, so of course medlab scientists also have to keep a patient's information private. So that's their personal information, their medical information. And this is because we know that medical information is very, very sensitive, extremely sensitive. As a medical personnel, even a non-medical personnel, it's easy to know that exposing a person's medical information can have very dire consequences for the person. It could affect their lives in ways that they can't recover from. Right. So it's very, very sensitive information. And so you hold a duty of care never to expose it to anybody besides that patient themselves if they've not given you the consent to expose it to anybody else. Right. So confidentiality comes to play a lot, like almost consistently throughout the whole medical process. From when the patient like walks into, let's say, a laboratory to, you know, make inquiries, when they want to take a test, once they start to give in their details in order to have that test done, confidentiality is already on the table, right? So, but sometimes I think we think about confidentiality in a don't tell X about Y's results, right? But and yes, that's it. But it's it's a lot more um it's a lot more simple than that, in the fact that it comes to play in everyday situations. It's not just about, oh, I know this person's result, I'm not going to tell the other person. It's also in the way you carry out your everyday laboratory duties, right? So in today, in today's world, in the world of social media, we find that people want to talk a lot, people want to create content, right? If you might think that it wouldn't be of any harm to me if I maybe take a picture of a person's results. Their name is not there now, their information is not there, and I post it online. That's actually a breach of confidentiality, right? Or if you um let me give an example of something that happened to me personally. So I went to a hospital to get a test run. It was even a simple test. But I remember they told me come back in X amount of time for your results. So I come back for the result, and I did it's a hospital that I'm not familiar with. And they're like, okay, I'm like, I don't know where to go and get the result from, because I'm standing in the reception talking to the nurse there. And I'm like, I don't know where the lab is. Like, where am I supposed to go to get my result? And she stands there in the reception where everybody is, and is like, what test did you run? I was just like, wow. And initially I was really shocked that a medical professional would do this. So I was shocked, so I didn't even respond. I was just looking at her. And she was like, what test did you come and run now? And I was really astounded at the level of lack of confidentiality. Like, was I supposed to announce it to the whole room? Whatever even if it was malaria tests. What if I don't want anybody to know I have malaria? Do you understand? So that is a breach of confidentiality. Do you get? So if you are discussing somebody's information where other people can hear, even if it's your fellow colleague, you are not supposed to be sharing that information. Or maybe maybe you're supposed to log in results on a computer and you want to step out of the room for a bit, instead of closing the computer or logging out of your portal, you just leave it open and you walk into the next room. What if somebody else comes into that room and takes a picture of the result, or even just sees it? If they see it, it's already a problem, right? So you can see that all of these things are everyday issues so you do everything within your capability, your power to protect a patient's result, patient's confidentiality. Think about it like if it were you, right? And treat you ought to treat everything. There's a tendency for us to look at things with, like, maybe if it was a HIV test now, you'll be thinking like, yes, this one is serious. This one was supposed to protect it. Maybe if it's malaria test, you might be thinking, it's just malaria. What's there? All right. But no, every test, every patient is owed a duty of confidentiality, even if it's just full blood counts that they came to do. What what if they don't want anybody to know that they came to do full blood counts? You understand me? Well, even if it was just their BP that they came to check, you should, maybe because you checked their BP, in many hospitals when you come, there will just be a place you go to the side to get your vitals taken, and you check somebody's BP, and you shout it back to the person. Your BP is this over this. Confidentiality. You understand? And this can easily become a significant problem, especially in situations where people's results get public without their permission, without their consent. It can escalate into a full-blown legal issue, because if there's a breach of confidentiality, a legal matter can be brought in court to say that you had breached their, confidentiality as your client, as your patient. And only God knows from how that will, snowball, what the snowball effect of that could lead to. Even if at the end of the day, maybe it was the court rules in the favor of the laboratory, in the favor of the lab scientist, and says like, oh yeah, it wasn't their fault. The amount of reputational damage it would have done at that point will be very costly. So certain things are just best not explored. Don't experience it. Don't let it get that far. So I hope this was able to answer the question, adequately.
Yes, you answered the question perfectly. Thank you so much. So let's say something has gone wrong, like a wrong result was released, a patient sample was misidentified, or an error contributed to harm to the patient. How is responsibility determined? Is it automatically the person who handles the sample, or does the investigation looks at the wider system? So I would like to give a scenario. Let's say an intern medical laboratory scientist released an unscreened blood for transfusion. It was later discovered after transfusion that the blood was a HIV positive blood. In this case, the person involved is an intern who is still learning under senior medical laboratory scientists. How does the law look at responsibility in this kind of situation?
Okay, thank you very much for that question. Like I said before, right? Every case is looked at on a case by case level, and I can't give you a blanket answer, right? Because as we're sitting down here having this chat, I'm not the final say on any situation, right? I like the fact that you, excuse me, tried to paint a scenario. And even if, let's imagine, it was like an intern, the consequences can be very, very different across board. And like I said, at some point during this discussion, every case would be looked at extensively. All right. Um, and that's why documentation is very important, because they would look at everything step by step. If it was an intern that made the mistake, the question was, questions will arise such as, was the intern fully qualified, to be the person to handle that job independently? You understand? Should you be leaving something as delicate as, a food, um, blood, what do you call it? I can't remember. But, a full blood transition to an intern to oversee or supervise alone? If the answer is no, okay, so the next question that will be raised was, who was in charge of the intern at that point in time? You get? So that person already comes in. So an intern might not be independently liable for whatever goes wrong. But at the same time, being a junior, because there was somebody supervising you, does not mean that you are now exempt from your professional responsibility at the same time. It now depends on what the investigative process shows us. Do you get? So, like I said, it will raise questions. Were they, you know, trained for this? Were they equipped for it? Not just in their medical training, like in school. As they entered that institution, that particular maybe laboratory, did they go through the full training process in-house? You know, were they competent enough as at the time this duty was given to them? If no, why? Where did it go wrong? Now, it is at that point, once they've been able to trace where it went wrong, you can now start problem solving from there and maybe also mapping out what consequences will have to be carried out in order to, should I say, solve this problem, within this context, so to speak. So, I would advise that if you're an intern, do your best to, ask questions, make sure you're following the right processes, make sure you know who is in charge of you. And, if something you're not sure of something, don't just go and do it because they said you should do it. Because things can go left and you can actually run the risk, although it might be a slim risk, but you can run the risk of destroying your career even before it begun. So I hope that kind of covered what you were asking.
Yes, you answered the question perfectly. And thank you for raising that salient point that as an intern or someone still training, it is best to stay under supervision. Now, looking beyond the individual professional, what can laboratories themselves do to reduce legal risk? What systems need to be put in place so that we are not relying solely on individual professionals to be careful in quotes?
Okay, thank you very much. Now, what can laboratories do? I think it will start very like at the very beginning with who you employ. You understand? So employ competent, properly trained people, and when they get into the system, have a system to train them also. You understand? Because of course you can employ somebody who has gone to school and has the relevant degree, so to speak, in that course. But there's also an in-house training because, even when it comes to laboratories, for instance, they differ. This lab may be a, operating on a small scale, another lab may be operating on a medium scale, another lab may be operating on a large scale. If you take a lab scientist who has only worked in a small scale lab and they get a job in a large scale lab, of course the processes will be different. Another thing that I think is very important will be don't leave any to imagination. Eh, these ones are they trained to know how to do it. You'll be very shocked to realize that they don't know how to do it. So there should be, procedures laid down, written, filed procedures for everything. This is what happens when the patient comes in. This is how to, engage them when they um identify what test they want to run. This is how to log in the tests. This is how to log in the patient. This is how to take their samples. This is how we store samples. This is how long we store samples. This is, the turnaround time for our test results. So tests should be ready under X amount. That process of from when the sample is taken to when the test is ready, it should be detailed, outlined. This is how when we get into the lab, this machine, this is how long it can be run for, this is how to use it, this is the rest time, this is what is to be done, everything. So when it comes to testing, SOP, result verification, SOP, result correction, SOP, confidentiality, SOP. Where something goes wrong, what is the incident reporting system that is laid down, even down to the penalties for, errors or mistakes made. It should all be laid down so that everybody knows what they are supposed to do at any time. Nobody's going to say, I just assumed, I just thought it was. No, the system was there. What were you thinking? Nobody asked you to use your brain to imagine anything, So it's important. I think it's very important that laboratories do that. Then lastly, of course, as we've discussed, I think it's very important that labs have an extensive documentation system. Document every little thing. Everybody document with your name, with your number, with your signature. Everything from beginning to end should be documented. And I think once the proper systems are put in place, even if you can't completely eliminate error, you go a long way in reducing it, making it as minimal as possible. I think that's what I have to say on that particular question.
Wow, wow, wow. I've learned a lot tonight, and I'm sure our audience are taking notes too. Our final question is, what is that one thing that every young laboratory professional and medical practitioner should know about protecting their patients and their career?
Okay, thank you very much. I think to summarize what I think every professional, every laboratory professional should know is basically do your best to equip yourself with all the knowledge you can, like of your profession, of course. But if you are, or rather, because I do believe that you would be graced with the opportunity to work in wonderful places. When you get there, use everything you can to know all the things you should know, right? Read the processes, ask the questions. I always like to think it's better to be considered a fool for asking too many questions than to, keep quiet and then end up actually proving that you are a fool. Don't look stupid. Ask questions first, figure it out, know what to do. When you now know what to do, please, by all means, do it. Do the right thing. Don't cut corners. Don't try to quicken the process or outsmart the process. No, just do what you need to do. While you are doing it, document every step. Document every step along the way, every little thing that you can document, write it down. And if something goes wrong, I think the first thing you can do is speak up about it. I know when things go wrong, a lot of times we tend to cower in fear. Like, oh my God, I've already made this mistake. If I talk about it now, they will almost kill me. Trust me, it's much better, much, much better for you to say as early as possible, I identified that something went wrong so that that thing that went wrong can be stopped as soon as it can and managed before it scales. A lot of times we think that, maybe if we ignore the problem, it will go away. When it doesn't, when you don't, report a problem early enough, it even runs the risk of making it look deliberate. Do you get? Because you'll be like, oh my God, I didn't mean for it to, it wasn't my intention. And the question is going to look like, if it wasn't your intention, so why didn't you tell us where you made the mistake? Now it looks like you intended for that mistake to be made, right? So if something goes wrong, speak up about it. Say it as quickly as you can, where you can take initiative. Where you can't, please don't take initiative because there are some things you shouldn't take initiative about. But where you can, definitely do. So, if you don't know something, ask about it. If you are not given the authority to do something, don't do it. If you make a mistake, please report it as soon as you can. And don't go about reporting it to maybe your colleague who cannot help the situation and might tell you, if you report this thing, you'll get in trouble. No, just go to your immediate lineup, your boss, the person who is your direct line report and report it. You get, and if you see a potential issue before it becomes an issue, speak up about it, right? And of course, at all times, please protect your client's confidentiality. Protect confidential information. Don't don't take liberties you shouldn't take. So I think, that's a summary of what I'd have to say. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you, Mola. That was very, very profound. Thank you for this amazing session, and thank you for joining us on LabCast today. Our dear listeners, as we draw the curtain on this episode, what is your takeaway? What are you doing differently, or what are you doing better? As always, we would love to read your input and stories regarding this matter. So feel free to send us email via medlaconvolabcast@gmail.com. My own takeaway is simple, actually. Every sample we handle, every result we release, and every record we create carries a level of professional responsibilities. Mistakes can happen, but ignoring them, covering them up, working beyond your competence, or failing to follow established procedures can turn a laboratory error into something much more serious. If you don't want that to happen, you would have to know your limit, ask questions, speak up, follow your SOPs, document your work, and speak up again, yes, when something doesn't seem right. That's it for this episode. See you on the next one. Bye.